Thank you for joining Jennifer Schaus and Associates in our 2019 Webinar Wednesday series. We are coming to you live from downtown Washington, D.C. Our webinars are every Wednesday, and you can find the upcoming schedule on our website. Past webinars and all recordings are also on our website and on our YouTube channel, along with over 160 other recordings on federal contracting topics. All are complimentary. If you have questions for our speaker today, you can email her directly with the contact information you'll see on the last slide. This is just a little bit about us. We are a Washington, D.C.-based firm and provide services for federal contractors. This ranges from market analysis reports to proposal writing and also post-award compliance. More information is on our website, so please visit us there. These are a few upcoming events that you can find more information on our website or here. And we now offer advertising, so you can contact me if you would like more information. All right, our speaker today is Marsha Lindquist, and we are going to be covering intermediate pricing strategies and pitfalls. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to some people who may be from goodness gracious across the pond. So intermediate pricing strategies and pitfalls today. Let's roll right into it on the next slide. So the most important thing is that I'm going to talk about there are so many pricing strategies to get out of your toolbox. In fact, I started to write down all of them the other day, and frankly, the list is fairly extensive. I'm going to hit 5 of them that I think that most companies and organizations can really use. So let's talk about these today. The first one is that you can impact your G&A, and by that, and I found out that about 63% of the population or so is impacting their G&A when they go out on bids. When they do, and it depends on the audience. Some audiences I find more are doing it than others. But what that means is that for each bid that you go out for, you first of all establish a baseline, and then you impact the G&A. You decide that the G&A may change upwards or downwards, mostly downwards, as a result of winning the bid that you're going after. And you do them one up at a time. In other words, you come up with the baseline, and every time you go for a bid, you take the baseline and change your G&A to account for the fact that you will win that contract. And so your G&A would go down. The second thing that I like to do, and these are kind of in the order in which I think most people can accommodate these, the use of what I call graybeards and also staff greening, older senior or more advanced, more seasoned professionals and newer staff, and integrating them together so that you get the benefit of the experience of the people who have the seniority, and you get the ingenuity and the innovative needs that you are looking for by using younger, less experienced people with great ideas. Doesn't mean that graybeards don't have great ideas. They do, but we want the staff greening so we can lower the price. The other thing that you can do, number 3, is to realize some efficiency savings. In other words, if you've done this kind of work before and you are keeping a database of how you've improved in terms of what you've done over time, then you can pick up on the efficiencies that you've learned in order to be able to employ those savings into the bid that you're working on. Sometimes learning curves come into play. In other words, the more we do something, the less effort it takes to do that. But you'd have to be creating a database so that you can do statistical learning curves to show how you have improved over time, or how you've, shall I say, improved your ability to do something with less effort. The other thing that's really important, and we're going to talk about this when we get to pitfalls, is your teammates' pricing. Most important thing about your teammates' pricing is that they can make or break your bid. They are really wonderful at wanting to bid with you, and if you are the prime and they are subcontractors, sometimes they don't have the same incentives that you do. So, and I'm going to talk about this some more when we talk about pitfalls. But the other thing that they need to do is they need to get on board with you about what your targets are. They need to give you better than your targets discussion. Hopefully you're having that discussion with them in your capture development phase, and that they are targeting either the targets that you all have established or the ones that they can do better on. If they're in the same, shall I say, the same balloon basket as you, then they want to have a lift off that goes very, very well. I'm trying to give you a visual because if they don't adhere to the philosophy, the balloon basket is not going to lift in the air. So we want that to happen. And the other thing that I will talk about is that not only are they in the same basket with you, but they also adhere to the schedule of when that pricing will be submitted to you, and also the form it takes when it's submitted to the government. Because let's face it, if someone hands you a pricing the day before something is due, and we're going to, as I say, talk about this more in pitfalls, you're going to find out that you don't have any wiggle room or time and the luxury of time in order to be able to impact that pricing. I stay on this particular point because this could be the linchpin that takes your bid down. And I will also say this. You as a prime, if you are the prime, have the obligation to do a subcontractor cost price analysis on each of those teammates. It's not something that's nice to have or that you can push off to an assist audit. It's something that you must do. So when you do that price analysis, hopefully you will have established what your targets are. You don't need to relay those to your subcontractors until they give you their first going in position. The fifth item here that I talk about frequently is what are your investments in the program at cost. These would be at no cost to the government. These are not something that you, for example, some companies say, well, we do training and that training is in our overhead. That doesn't qualify. Investments have to be things that you are not asking for reimbursement in any form for. I get a lot of questions from people about this. People say to me, well, I'm a small company, I can't make any investments. I'm betting that if you scratched your head, there's probably something, however small it may be, that you can offer to the government that is your investment in the particular program that you're going after. I was working on a larger bid a couple of years ago, and the company that I was working with actually said they didn't want the government to pay for the non-recurring expenses because, very honestly, they wanted to maintain control of that particular item, didn't want to have reimbursement so that they could then use it again later on. All right, let's move on to the next slide. So in here, I wanted to give you some idea of what people are doing. It's not just about profit and indirect rates. So many companies say to me, well, we don't have any control over everything. It's really about how much profit we put on this and our indirect rates. And if we don't get those low enough, then we won't win. Well, it's more than that. We just talked about 5 things that weren't either one of those 2. So let's talk about what some people do out there in the marketplace. Most importantly, I find that 24% of the population does make a cut to their indirect rates. Some people, 45% of the population truly focuses only on profit margins. And if that's the only place that you focus, you're not going to be able to make any big inroads because there's just so much profit margin that you have a chance to work with. Here's the one that I was talking about. You can push your subcontractors and suppliers to lower their targets. In other words, if you establish together, as a team what your target is, that's one thing. But if you say to your subcontractor or your supplier, I need for you to give me your best bid, When you go back to them, hopefully you've got several chances at going back to them. You will be able to ask them to lower their targets of what they've given you. 36% of the time, the people that I surveyed found out that that's what they do. The other thing is that some people emphasize what I consider to be conservative labor rates or even uncompensated overtime. I group those together because some people can't make a distinction between the two. Conservative labor rates means that you are bidding what your payroll is, or going back to that staff greening, you're putting in lower priced new hires, or you're using uncompensated overtime. 30% of the time, my respondents told me that that's one of the things that they do. Again, these are different pricing strategies that we didn't talk about on the last slide, but there are things that you can consider. Here's the big one. 27% of the population that I interviewed about these particular items said they employ all of the above. That's quite astounding. I'm hoping that you take away some notes on this one. Okay, next slide. So, there are some pricing pitfalls that I consider to be the top, let me call it my top 5. I wrote down the other day some more pricing pitfalls, and I came up with way many more, but these are the top ones that seem to bubble up most of the time. If you're lacking customer intelligence, in other words, if you're going after a bid that you found on FedBizOps and you know nothing about the customer, then you are lacking customer intelligence. You really haven't had time to present your company and their capabilities to the customer, and I'm talking about the technical customer as well as the contracts customer, both. People ask me, what about one versus over the other? And I say, you need to do both. If you don't have intelligence about the customer, then I have to ask you why you're spending your B&P dollars. If you don't know what they want and what their hot buttons are, then you're really competing over price most of the time. Okay, number 2, you don't have any pricing strategy. You're just slapping numbers together, kind of an offshoot of the first one, because if you're responding to an RFP and you don't really know the customer, you don't really know what kind of pricing strategy to go after. You don't know what their pain points are. You don't know really where they're looking for value, where they're looking for savings, what their mentality is about your pricing. So, if you're just slapping numbers together, that's a problem. If you're just responding to RFPs and you don't have background, that's a problem. In number 3, we sort of talked about this. Your subcontractors can mess up the price. I mean, you may, if you're doing competitive bidding for your subcontractors, and most companies are not, they're choosing their subcontractors up based on technical qualifications. If you've not had conversation with your subcontractors about the price, or if you're a subcontractor and your prime has not asked you to participate in that conversation, that's a problem, because you need to be involved with your primes, and your subs need to be involved together in order to come up with where you need to be. And if you are the prime, like I say, you have the obligation to do the price and cost analysis. That means you've done your homework about what is reasonable and realistic out there in the marketplace for the talent for which you are trying to subcontract. Okay, so number 4 is that you could be missing the cost and technical integration. What do I mean by that? What I mean is your technical proposal is saying one thing and you're costing something else. And I don't know how often you may get questions back from people in the government, ENs, that kind of thing, that ask you, wow, basically your technical proposal says this and your cost proposal says that, and they do not match. that's an immediate flag that says the two have not talked. So take the step that's necessary to make sure that the cost volume is in sync with what you're saying in the technical proposal. So often, the technical people give the cost people information for them to price, and then the technical team goes off and does a red team review or something like that. They change stuff up, and it changes the technical approach, and they haven't communicated that to the cost people. So I would say it's very important to have somebody be the integration point, or several people be the integration point for making sure they're in sync. The number 5 here is that you have little or sometimes no plan for unusual costs. In other words, what do I mean by that? How often, and I need to do a survey on this, how often do you go to a red team review on price, or a green team review, or maybe even a gold team review, and you find out, hang on, a little bit of allergies, I think. How often do you find out that management makes an emotional decision that seems a bit unusual, that says, let's cut another 10% off this price? Now, when they do that, the cost people hit their head and scramble like crazy for the next 24 hours to incorporate that 10% change somehow, somewhere, and it ripples through the entire proposal. So let's make a plan for that and make that happen sooner. Get your reviews in sooner rather than later. Next slide. So let's talk about what are the big takeaways from today. I think the biggest one on the strategies is impacting the G&A. I think that's where you get some of your biggest gains in changing the price. In other words, if you have the ability to impact the G&A, let's say from, let's call it, I'm pulling numbers out of the air, from 20% to, if you won this bid, to 15%, you've just made a 5% change in your price without really doing much other than showing that if you won it, you would impact the G&A. I'm using fictitious numbers now, so understand that it may not be 5%, it may be less than that, it could be more than that. Number 2, your teammates' pricing is so important to making sure that you win. It's equally as important as your own pricing. So don't pay it short shrift. Make sure that you've got adequate time and concentration on making sure the teammates' pricing is what you want it to be. Okay, number 3, 45% of our bidders really focus on impacting the price with cuts to profit margins. That says a lot, and it's not a big number. So I want to get people off of focusing just on profit margins, because after all, the government does want you to make a decent profit. If you are bidding 1 or 2% or some crazy thing like that, you're not covering your unallowable costs. So make sure you're not in the bargain basement on your profit margin. Then here was the real exciting part, that 27% of our bidders do many different tools to make their bid competitive. In fact, they used all of the tools on that one sheet of where I gave you information about what people are doing out there in the marketplace. And then number 5, the biggest reason that we find that bidders do not win is that they lack customer intelligence. Now, how do I know that? They go back after they have lost and ask the customer why they lost, and they find information out that they should have known before they even bid. So those are our takeaways from today. I thank you very much for allowing me to address you this morning and talk to you about some of these things that I feel passionate about. And thank you very much for today.
Thank you, Marcia, for sharing your knowledge and insight today. Today's presentation has been recorded and can be found on our website or YouTube channel within about 48 hours. If you have questions about today's topic, please contact Marsha at the phone number or email shown on your screen. Thank you, everybody. This concludes the webinar.